Would you rather have wireless on the most reliable network nationwide or unlimited with 5G for $30 a month per line? You don't have to choose with Xfinity Mobile. Wireless so good it keeps one-upping itself. Most reliable based on Roots Metric US report. Results vary, not an endorsement. $30 per month per line when you get 4 lines.
Hi there, I am Adem Kirbas. I'm here in Ordu, a Turkish town in the Black Sea region. We are still in the pandemic, and I hope you all are doing fine. Today I want to continue our investigation, let's say, or our overview about gender. Today we will talk about male masculinity, male gender. But before we go on, I want to make sure one thing. We talked about significant changes in the area of millennials. This is true, and of course, one of the significant changes is the pandemic, and I think the effect. The pandemic is a significant change in our area, of course, but we do not know yet how these changes will be. So it would not make much sense to talk about it right now. It will take approximately another year so that everyone will be vaccinated and so on, and then after this, when things start to normalize, it will probably take another 3 to 5 years when we will see the effect of the pandemic, and of course we will have to investigate of the origin. We will have to investigate, of course, into Austria as well as in Germany, which role did they play. I'm not saying here anything, just one thing, and this is before the World Health Organization sends investigators to Wuhan. I would rather suggest they send some investigators to Vienna, because those who lived in Vienna the last couple of years, they know that there are some disturbing incidents, disturbing occurrences, and so on. So we will probably know more after the pandemic, and of course it will depend on how much willing people are to investigate in this issue, because it needs to proper investigation to stop certain practices which might have led to what we are right now. However, we are talking about male masculinity. I want to talk about male gender. As you know, the last time we said that it was construed in a way, and that there is a difference between biological sex as well as social sex. This is my approach to gender, no matter whether it is female gender or male gender. I know that within the feminist literature, especially with Judith Butler, those people who follow Judith Butler, they know that she was an ardent critic of this separation. I disagree. I think this separation is important, and those I rather go with Simone de Beauvoir, and please make sure that there are many approaches, and I don't think that mine is more valid or true than others, but it makes just more sense from my point of view, from my perspective, and of course this is more than just a statement. I have to prove it. This is something you always have to do if you some sort of suggest something, or if you have a hypothesis then you have to prove it or give some ground for your assumptions. However, and I want to go a little bit through history, where I think one can see these hypotheses more carefully or more accurately. And of course, again, history has one great thing besides being very interesting, of course, and inciting, as well as there are many interpretations possible. Mine is not in stone. I mean, we know about male roles, about male gender roles, or if you want to call it male moral archetypes, because those male gender roles, they were in the past moral archetypes. We know them from the antiquity. Of course, this did not start. Moral archetypes, as well as how man should behave, did not start in the antiquity. Nevertheless, we have the most artifacts from the antiquity, from this time, especially the Greek literature, despite the fact that we do not even have 10% of all this culture. Nevertheless, this 10% or less than 10% are very telling. And in Greek culture, of course, this is what you would say. This is Greeks lived a very simplistic lives, or the way they tried to differentiate from all others was one thing, was they lived a very simplistic lives, and they would always compare themselves with Persians, whereas Persians were always considered some sort of this living in luxury, in gluttony, and so on. There are very famous examples. For example, Alexander the Great, when he conquered Persia, he started to dress himself like Persian. He some sort of welcomed the Persian nobility into the Greek nobility. This was one of the reasons why he was called a despot, and so on. So the Greeks tried him for them. And of course, we know something. This is by Aristotle, assumably that Persians would not differentiate between their wives and slaves. I mean, we don't know. We have to be aware of one thing, that Aristotle himself was a slave. He was a helot. He was a slave in his polis. However, but this had a very fundamental effect, of course, in one way, how to behave, how to act, living a simplistic life. And of course, to this very day, this Greek confrontation between the East and the West play a crucial role to this very day. This is some sort of cultural separation between the Orient and the Occident, and nowadays in recent time between Islam and Christianity. So these things, and if you pay close attention in the Greek antiquity, these issues play a crucial role there, and even had a huge influence on today, as well as the Greeks would call everyone who is non-Greek a barbarian. This has some sort of was taken over, as well, is still part of our culture. So everyone who is not being considered in a way civilized is being considered as barbarian, and in a way, the way how other cultures treat their women is partially as well as called in uncivilized cultures. One would find these sorts of behavior. I mean, I will talk about this in a little bit later, but these are the first things we know about how man should behave. You have to always be aware, male gender, as well as actually female gender is always about how you behave, and of course it comes with a moral on how to present yourself and how to think of yourself, because a moral is always we have to think of morality always with inclusion and exclusion, and morality always works with resentment. This means you have to separate yourself in a way or another from all others. And in the Greek tradition, this is something you could see throughout the literature, so that Persians, for example, they would always be obedient to a despot, so on. There are a lot of places, whereas Greeks, they have a democracy, they are polis, this is rather equality, you could say. Well, the East and the Orient would be some sort of considered inequality, and this has to this very day had a huge influence on how we act and behave, especially men. Then another source we have from the Roman Empire, especially in the beginning. This was some sort of you could understand this partially as history. It is being considered part of his history, but not how we understand history today, but as well as partially as some sort of a nursery rhyme which was told to Romans and how to behave yourself, especially how Roman citizens would behave themselves, that they would be proud of their republic. This was when Romanity, some Romans, some sort of I don't want to go too deep in Roman history, but this is the Romans had some sort of an archetype on how to behave, what morals, values a Roman citizen should have. And one thing was that a Roman citizen is proud of his republic. A Roman citizen does not betray his republic, his friends, or whatever, and would even literally or figuratively put his hand into the fire, that he would not surrender by any means necessary. I mean, there are very interesting things. These were some sort of, you could consider these archetypes in one hand as moral guidelines, how you as a Roman have to behave, but as well as some sort of nursery rhymes which were told to children, and which were then in extension part of Roman history, because it was closely embedded in history, in Roman history. So people would tell these each other. I mean, this all starts with the founding history of Rome, with Romulus and Remus, and how they grew up and so on. This mythology was partially not separated what we would do today, but was really incorporated in their daily lives, and this was then led to how men have to behave, but as well as women. Another archetype or moral behavior or moral code was then Christian morality. Friedrich Nietzsche, German philosopher, wrote a lot about Christian morality. I mean, I don't want to go now into detail, but I think Friedrich Nietzsche is very important for postmodernism and thinking, and I want to dedicate maybe later one episode to him, because I think it is very important what he said about morals, about general assumptions and so on. So, however, Christianity was developed some sort of a slave morale. This was Christianity was some sort of religion from the simple man. You have to be aware of one thing, that in the Roman Empire, Christians were prosecuted up to when Christianity became in 300 AD under Emperor Constantine national religion in the Roman Empire. Christianity were Christians were persecuted, and they were poor. They had nothing to hope for. They hide from the public. This was partially in Cappadocia, today in Turkey. You found some places where they lived in caves and so on. And of course, when this is your background, if you are prosecuted, of course, the individuum or the individual, the person falls out of the out, and then the herd, like Nietzsche said it, the group becomes the center of all attention. This is normal. This is what you see in the animal kingdom as well. If you want to survive, you don't survive on your own, but with a group, you have to be always aware. If you are prosecuted from a state in the Roman Empire, then your survival is of course only the group and not the individual, or not the single person. And this may have led to this herd morale, what Nietzsche talks about. This is when the individual gets lost in the masses. But then this changes. I think this is something you can indeed see and prove. This some sort of slave morale of Christianity changes in the history, and it changes when Christianity became national religion in the Roman Empire. Of course, when Christians were prosecuted, then they would be some sort, not only humble, but would be more complacent with other religions. They would rather advocate for peaceful together, and this then changes with when Christians come into power. This is when they start persecuting other religions. This is the age where you can say Christianity starts with some sort of a purity, some sort of soul cleansing, being religious, pious, and then getting rid of this pagan rituals, which was part in the Roman Empire, which were very important in the Roman Empire. And before the Christians came into power, the Roman state was more or less, I mean, this is never clean, but it was more or less secularized. There were many cults, there were many religions, and the state itself was rather outside religion. And the reason why Christians were actually persecuted was that they would not accept those Roman gods, or those polytheistic gods next to their own religion. The reason why they were persecuted was because Christianity was actually not willing to make compromises in accepting other religions next to them. This was actually the reason why they were then persecuted. And then when they took over of the slave morality, then became some sort of a morality of purity, of cleansing, being decent, pious, and so on. And in all these stages, I mean, I have only talking about antiquity and the rise of Christianity. In all these episodes of history, a man had always be careful on how to conduct himself. Man were the preserver of family and the defender of family. And from the antiquity to the New Ages, this was crucial. This was crucial because of militarism, and you could say, if you see this from this background, that militarism and the military played a crucial part on how men behave in public, as well as how they conduct themselves within the Roman Empire, as well as in ancient Greece. The military was very influential. In ancient Greece, the military defended the Greeks from Persian conquest, upheld Greek civilization. They had a high reputation, and in the Roman Empire, the military extended the empire. The Roman legions carried the Roman eagle of the empire throughout the entire Mediterranean. And then, when the Roman Empire declined, the military could keep this empire together. This is as well as known those era in the Roman history where soldiers became emperors. This was so the military was pretty much the only protection against hordes of barbarians like Goths and Huns. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, again the military as well as swordsmanship like knights became very important in Europe, and they were some sort of a bastion against those plundering hordes, because after the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe some sort of fall into its dark ages. There were constant wars, and this would lead to the and of course there were religious wars, Reformation, and so on, and up to the Peace of Westphalia. Europe, or the history of Europe, is a very bloody one. In if you compare this to other parts of the world, Europe is a bloody continent. In Europe, many wars were fought about religion, about whatever reason, but nevertheless, the history of man of human history is first of all always written by man. This is something we have to admit, but as well as it is a history of war, as well as a history of the military and moral principles for man, how man should behave. This male gender derives their principles and guidelines from the military and the military life. I mean, you could say the first principle was to live a simplistic life. Of course, as a soldier, you live very simple. You do not live in wealth or so ever. And of course, this is another very important issue. Is you are always this threat in military. The big issue is this is the psychological effect is that there is a constant threat of defeat or being some sort of overrun by the enemy. This has led to some sort of an absolutistic thinking. Either I win or I lose. These are indeed military prowesses or military thinking. And another thing is being obedient to superiors, because this is the only way an army works, or that there are superiors, or that you have to follow your superiors. And as well as there is a very good example in the Roman Empire, especially when those soldiers, ordinary soldiers, became emperors. One big issue was that in the Roman Empire there were constant civil wars, and in these civil wars, always emperors would be killed. So a lot of emperors were actually killed by either by their own men or by a Praetorian Guard. And in order to protect themselves against assassination, this is what the Romans then started, or the Roman emperors started. They some sort of cloaked themselves in a way of divinity, that the emperor would be beyond normal humans, that the emperor would be special, and in order to stop people assassinating them. Later, this was extended to the aristocracy, because the aristocracy was nothing as the military class within the empire, and in the late Roman Empire, the military kept the empire together, and then the aristocracy became an institution in the Middle Ages and then into the New Ages, and this institution had always some sort of a cloud of divinity, and in order, of course, to protect themselves against internal foes as well as external foes, especially against assassinations. And another militaristic virtue, as well as some sort of a male gender, was defending your home and country. This goes back to the Roman Empire, to the beginning, to Greeks and whatsoever, and then in extension, taking care of your family, being the sole provider of your family, because you keep them safe, you keep the enemy at bay, you can ward off any attacks of the enemy. This means you, as the man, protect your family as well as you have to protect your family, and you some sort of mirror then in extent this role model as the great protector of your family. You are their great protector. And then later in Christianity, that the man preserves the religion and the tradition. This has to do with the military as well, because if new hordes like the Goths or Huns come in, they have their own religion, they have their own traditions, and if they win, then everything is lost. And as a man, you are obliged to, or this is being laid on your shoulders, that you have to protect your life and so on. So you could see that in the beginning, and this is up to the eve of the revolutions in the 18th century, this is where man or male gender is very militarized. It follows militaristic principles, how men should conduct themselves, how they should act, and this is of course to go on adventure, because military life had of course adventure in it, but mostly to be the sole insurance for the survival of the family, and this was very important, and this was the self-view of man up to the eve of the revolutions in the 18th century. And then with those liberal revolutions, things change. I said it in the past. I think that the French Revolution was more important than the American, because one thing the French Revolution did, they got rid of this feudal system in France, whereas in America, because it was far away from Great Britain, a feudal system had, like in Europe, a feudal system like in Europe had not developed. So the French Revolution was, in my sense, very important, and of course, because of its proximity to Europe. However, with the French Revolution, some sort of a new moral archetype emerges. This is through the business class or bourgeoisie, and these are mainly factory owners and who built their armies, if you want, not on soldiers, but rather on trade. And this liberal revolution then had the businessman in the center, and the battlefield, if you want, was then the market. And this new businessman was then considered as the new role model. There's of course a very good study which I will partially use here as well. This is from Max Weber. Max Weber was a German philosopher and sociologist, and he wrote a very famous book. This is the Protestant ethics, which he argued would be the sole reason for the rise of capitalism. I mean, I would say this is only half true. There were other cultures as well, which were very trade oriented. For example, Islam did not have some sort of a Max Weber, nevertheless, or did not have some sort of ethics. Nevertheless, the Orient became very wealthy because of its geographical location, where they were some sort of could partake in the Silk Road to Asia, as well as could control the trade with Europeans. However, nevertheless, it makes sense to look into Max Weber as well, and Max Weber's Protestant ethics, which then became some sort of the ethics of the businessman. Business class is, you could say, has some validity, and this is at first, men are laborers, so you work your ass off, but it is not anymore to provide your family, because before you could say the soldier, he had nothing to left but to prevent hordes of barbarians coming in, pouring in, and destroying his home. Now we have a new type of archetype, and this says that men are laborers, men as well as do not doubt. So this is again one of the issues of the Protestant ethics. So if you doubt whether you are the chosen one, then you have already lost it in a way, and that of course that you have to prove that you are successful as a man, as well as that you are religious, that you are pious. This means success. You could then need to show in a way through gathering of wealth. Laborers, being laborers does not mean just to work, but being successful means then as a man to work, and as a man again, you are the sole preserver of your family. You are righteous as well as just. There are very famous plays of Friedrich Schiller. Friedrich Schiller was a very famous German author, playwright, and he wrote some plays, and in his plays you can really see the difference. What is some sort of this old aristocratic class, and what is now the new liberal citizenship, or what's the new liberal citizen, this difference. And one is of course being homebound, being closely to family values, being honest, and so on. And of course with the businessman, or being a businessman, another factor comes to emerge, and this is your personal reputation. Because as a businessman, if you want to do business, people rather will make business first of all with their own kind. This is true, and as well as and then with people who have a good reputation, who are being considered faithful, who do not doubt themselves, who are pure in their intentions and this reputation. Then with the in this age, with those new with this emergence of the new business class, then became extended to his entire family as well, so that a man's reputation as a businessman, as being successful, could be hampered by his wife or his family members. And then again, the man became some sort of the sole guardian of his own family's reputation, of his family's perception in the public. So this and of course any negative effect then would reflect badly on him, and he could then lose out in this struggle for presenting yourself as being laborious, being successful, showing your success, because this is what it means, or you could at least interpret Max Weber in that sense, that being successful, you have to show in a way or another that you are faithful, that you are laborious. And how can you do it then? In exposing your wealth, in gathering your wealth, and this came with the change. But despite of the rise of the bourgeoisie, this liberal citizen character, militarism in Europe was not dead at that moment. Militarism, of course, in Europe developed a little bit different than in America. Some Europeans, me included, do not always understand this American fixation with the military. It made partially sense after I heard or read about some things. There is, of course, things you don't know, and however, that the militarism or the Veterans Day was actually brought forward or was initiated by black soldiers. It was rather to commemorate them. This is a different development than in Europe, because in Europe the military class, first of all, was always aristocratic. Later on it opened, but then after the First and Second World War, the military in Europe, they fell in disgrace. And this was especially after the Second World War, where reports became available for everyone what the German Wehrmacht or any other collaborators did in the East. I mean, these mass executions and all other atrocities. This is one of the reasons, because why today some far-right groups in Austria as well as in Germany deny the existence of gas chambers or of executions in order to save and preserve the honor of the military. However, because of these atrocities, the German military lost its reputation, and the French were humiliated in a way, as well as other European countries, and the military then had some sort of lost its purpose, and this was, you could say, then the real end of this military archetype, that the uh, uh, which died in the trenches and mass graves of Europe. But the Second World War was, and then later the Vietnam War, especially in the US, was very important because then again you could say a new social or a new moral archetype of man emerges. This is especially in the Vietnam War or during the Vietnam War. Those who have seen some pictures of this war, this is when veterans and soldiers openly question the war and even throw their medals away, throw it into to the White House. So those military honors, they do not count anymore. You do not can virtue anymore. The military archetype has no virtue anymore. This is the rise of flower power. This is when men begin in a way start thinking about being pacifists. That war and violence would be useless, and especially with the rise of the sexual revolution. This was in the 60s up to the 70s with this flower power and this movement, the freedom of sexualization. Men do not oppress their women anymore. This is some sort of a new archetype of the new pacified man who thinks about the world and itself. And this then becomes very crucial for millennials, because in millennials then with this development of feminism over sexuality, this millennial masculinity then has a way more different approach, and we will look into it the next time. This was Adem Kirbas from Ordu, Turkey. I hope you all getting through the pandemic well and take care of yourself. Bye.
There are more ways to celebrate than ever before at the Jeep Celebration event. Hurry in for great deals today on the only brand that lets you go anywhere and do anything. And right now, get $1,500 total cash allowance on the purchase of a 2022 Jeep Compass Latitude 4x4. Don't miss this great offer. Go to Jeep.com to find your local dealer. Hurry into the Jeep Celebration event today. Residency restrictions apply. Must take retail delivery by 5/2/22. Jeep is a registered trademark of FCA US LLC.